This is the Eye Seduction Channel.
Have you ever visited the Fillmore West?
I have, but way after the event. I never got to California at the time that the theaters were open, and I didn't get to California for the first time in my life till something like 1976, 76 maybe. But I was out there in 1996 when the restored original Fillmore Auditorium reopened again with Eric Clapton, and went to one of the concerts there as a guest of the Bill Graham Presents organization.
How do you think the Fillmore East and the Fillmore West were different in vibe and atmosphere, New York versus California?
The difference wasn't just strictly New York, California. The difference was profound. Fillmore West was the old Carousel Ballroom, and it was a hippie ballroom. There were no reserved seats. It was open. It was just an open area where people sat on the floor. They wandered around. They stood up. They danced. The light shows were front projections splashed all over the performers and the walls, and it was a completely different situation. The Fillmore East was a classic theater with reserved seats, 2,632 of them, and it became the venue where rock music became rock theater, and where all the innovations responsible for the rock music that we're familiar with today in its presentation, from the light show, rear projection light show, really professional, terrific stage lighting, really decent, wonderfully mixed audio. Those were the contributions made by the NYU students and the staff at the Fillmore East that transformed the experience from a kind of a hippie happening into a really theatrical entertainment spectacular, and all of the innovations that are now standard in the presentation of the music really were invented there by this amazing group of creative people, most of whom were at NYU. And the difference is night and day. And it also, one of the reasons that Bill Graham eventually was convinced to open a theater in New York was because the music business at that time was centered in New York. I think today it's in Los Angeles. But in those days, television, record companies, everybody was in New York. And this was the place where the record company executives wanted to come to see the groups. They didn't want to fly out to San Francisco. And it was on that kind of business basis that Graham was convinced that New York was the place to open a theater. There was another reason emotionally for him, is because when he eventually got to the United States as a 10-year-old boy, he was adopted by a family in the Bronx, and he grew up in New York City, and this was his home stomping grounds, and so it was a kind of a homecoming for him to come back here and run a theater, and that was was really, really, really major.
Did you develop a friendship with Bill Graham?
Friendship wouldn't be the right word, because he was a very imposing presence, and I was this young woman, and I was not entirely comfortable with him at that point. I didn't have the same kind of confidence. I didn't have self-confidence because of the circumstances of the hierarchy. But we got to be professionally friendly throughout the tenure of my tenure at Fillmore East, because he got to see my photographs and he really liked them, and they were used sometimes in the weekly programs, and there were prints that were on the walls in the office, and he as a result, he let me photograph some private moments in his office when he was with his son David, David was like 2.5 years old. And so he respected my work as a photographer, and so he treated me very fairly. And even after the Fillmore East closed, and later on, when I photographed Bob Dylan from the 1974 tour, which Graham had produced, he liked one of my photographs so much that he bought a print of it and gave it to Dylan as a gift.
Oh, wow.
So I maintained a very nice professional relationship with Bill. What I'm really sorry about is that at the time I didn't know what his background was as a Holocaust survivor, because if I had, I like to imagine that I might have found another way to talk to him. Although what I don't know, of course, is at that time in his life whether he would have even been willing to talk about that. He certainly did many years later, but perhaps at that particular time in his life, it still wasn't something that he wanted to talk about or wanted people to know about, which is maybe why we didn't know about it.